Joining us, MS Now business analyst and publisher of The Message of the Markets on Substack, Ron Insana, staff writer for The Atlantic and MS Now political analyst Ashley Parker, and host of Puck's The Powers That Be podcast and Snapchat's Good Luck America, Peter Hamby.
Yes, ma'am.
What can this administration point to right now as a good sign in the economy?
Well, economic growth is surprisingly resilient, despite all the things that you mentioned in the introduction.
Who is it resilient for?
Those who are building out artificial intelligence infrastructure, data centers account for about three-quarters.
A small subset.
It's a small subset, but it accounts for about three-quarters of the growth that we have. Consumer spending has slowed to about a 1.6% rate, which is below what we'd like to see in an economy that relies 70% on the consumer. And we're seeing more of a K-shaped economy where those who are in the top 10% are spending 50% of all dollars. Those who are in the middle and lower income groups are struggling to get by. So the administration can't point to much other than the data center build out that's supporting the AI economy.
Well, Donald Trump's surely going to point to this as a sign that things are going to improve. Kevin Warsh just was confirmed. Party line vote except for Senator Fetterman, who voted for him as well. He will succeed Jerome Powell as the chair of the Federal Reserve. What can he do?
Not much right now, with inflation, as we saw this morning in the wholesale inflation report, surging 1.4%, 6% year over year. Yesterday's consumer inflation report was also hotter than expected. There's no room for him to cut interest rates at all.
What if he does?
You'd get more inflation, and it would be problematic for him in the longer run. And you'd see bond yields go up. You might see the dollar come down. And that would just really literally throw gasoline on an inflation fire that is smoldering right now and could get out of control if they make a 1970s style mistake at the Federal Reserve and cut interest rates at a time when inflation is moving up, not down.
These numbers, Ashley, in poll after poll, Americans will say they don't feel good about everything. You have the hard numbers on the consumer price index. You have the inflation numbers. We were talking about growth, but that, again, is for AI-driven stuff. And when you talk to economists like Ron, very smartly, they'll tell you about the K-shaped economy and how the rich are doing well, but everybody else is having a much harder time. Is the White House seeing this as a five-alarm fire?
Some people around the president, particularly on his political team, understand that this is a five-alarm fire, but they have not been able to get him to focus or to message it the way that they would like him to. And I will just add that the way people feel, which, again, there's economic indicators, but that's not how people feel. President Biden, there were a lot of things he could point to and he did that were going in the right direction or were going well. But people's checking accounts at the end of the month, if they had, $1,000 to handle an unexpected medical emergency, that's what that election in many ways hinged on. And that's the same problem now. So this is bad for any president of any party, but it is in some ways doubly bad for Donald Trump, who sold himself, whose sort of reason to exist was as a savvy billionaire businessman. Now, it's worth noting that a lot of that was based off of a fake reality TV show known as The Apprentice, but he did come into people's living rooms and homes for years that way. That's what they believed from him. So not only are they feeling it in a way that hurts any politician, but this was the reason they were willing to overlook the bad behavior, the character flaws, the things he said that they didn't love, other policies they might not have fully been on board with, was for the economy. And now they're not even getting that.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people would tell me that they watched him on The Apprentice. They saw him do hiring and firing, and that's what made them believe that he was a great businessman and he'd be great for this country. They really did buy into it. A lot of the underlying concern here, or something that we should be paying close attention to, I think, is what people say about the future. And the prospects that people have for the future are not good. They're not optimistic about what might happen next, either with their personal jobs or with the world. General safety, AI is certainly scaring a lot of people. So when you hear from folks who are worried about the future and want something better, what do they want exactly, Peter? What are they hoping to hear?
I mean, I think the first thing is just the present. If things don't feel right in their bank accounts, if they don't feel right at the pump, This is supposed to be the season when people are looking at buying houses, and interest rates were climbing below 6% before the war started. Now they're back up at 6. And so it's very hard for people who took a flyer on President Trump in the election, particularly young people, but maybe young couples too with families, to trust somebody about the future and what they're promising when the present doesn't look very good either. And when Trump talks about the war, for example, and correlates it to gas prices, he's been saying for 10 weeks now that this is going to be over in 2 weeks. Morgan Stanley just put out a note to investors, Katie, saying that this is the largest oil disruption in history. And this was always going to have a long tail effect on gas prices. Look at states this year where there are midterm elections, gas prices in Alaska, where there's a huge Senate race, over $5. Nevada, where there's a huge governor's race, Democrats are trying to take back that seat, over $5. Maine, Ohio, Michigan, gas prices are really bad for people across the board. And so President Trump lost trust on the economy, in particular with young voters. I think that's what you're alluding to, pretty quickly after he came into office, despite the fact that many of them voted for him. And it just hasn't recovered then. And it's remarkable that a Republican president is doing this to himself. In past elections, Republicans always have a built-in advantage on the economy. Even in 2020, during COVID, when the economy was bad, Biden and Trump fought to parity in exit polls on the question of who would do better on the economy. Now Trump is underwater across the board on inflation, on prices, on trade. For a Republican president to suffer those numbers and do it to himself is pretty remarkable politically, Katie.